you're like me, you've either bought a car that came with an aftermarket bumper, or you've got a friend that's got one, but it's got a little bit of damage, but it's the same color as your car, might work. This video is how to fit an aftermarket bumper that sucks onto a good car, or at least a car that you want to make look good. This bumper has 3 major issues. All 3 are issues that you'll find on any type of car that is old and has either knockoff or just aftermarket bumpers. Even if you buy a genuine Rheomemia front bumper like TJ did for his RX-7, you're still gonna have fitment issues. It's not the OEM bumper. On the other hand, if you're like this and you have like the burnout kit or any of the kits like this, you end up finding out that you bought a replica. Not that I support the replica business, it just ended up being on this car. I'm gonna make this look good. The first issue with this bumper, it is not square. It doesn't line up. You have to make sure you set the vehicle in a way that lets you tell where the problem is at. Is it the bumper? Is it the fenders? Is it the hood? Is it the wheels? Has the car been in an accident? There's a lot of different things. So the first thing we're gonna do is square things up and identify the problems. The distance of the bumper to the wheel has been roughly about 3 inches. Look at the gapping, look at the spacing here. You go to the other side, we're gonna hit another 3 inches, but again, these don't line up. The bumper is pretty square at the moment, and you can see that this line is not. The hood is square, the fenders are square, even the headlight covers are all pretty square and flush with the body. But this bumper needs to be trimmed down here. There's a lot that needs to happen right in this area. It's gonna be very hard for that camera to tell what's going on because of the wide angle. Jerry's on an angle himself, he's not the center of the car. Take my word for it that even the parts of the front bumper aren't completely equal. So our choices are this. Get the bumper to line up in the space that we absolutely need it. The first area being the wheel wells, the second area being the front of the hood. And I'm not saying make this line flush. What I'm saying is make the bumper flush so that way everything else can work around it. So those are the areas that we care about most. And then aesthetically, make the front of the bumper as square as possible. It's pretty close now, so I think what's gonna happen is that we're gonna push this bumper up a little bit, up and in, and then lock it in place and then work our magic from there. The second issue, if you're like me, you've got some damage on your car, especially if you guys are doing your drift missiles and all that sort of crazy crap. I have an intercooler that is less than ideal. Thankfully, Bell Intercoolers is making a new one for this car, but it's in the 4-rotor as a mock-up. So I'll show you how to deal with problems underneath the bumper that cause you to try to cheat it and fit with what you've got. You gotta fix that stuff too. Both sides of the bumper need to move back about a ½ inch. Here's our problem. Right here, the bumper is pivoting, and you're wondering, why is it doing that? Let's take the bumper off. We're hitting the bumper against this now deformed intercooler. So we have to make some decisions about this. Look at the intercooler itself. That's pretty gnarly. This is why I need to learn how to weld, so I can fix stuff like this. That tab's broken.
When you learn how to weld, would you weld this piece to that piece?
Well, you weld it and then make a bracket so that we can screw in to that hole right there. Because it originally did years ago. But when we spun out in the rain, front of the impact hit right here. This hit this. Oh my God, I want to pull this bar out.
Oh, what is that?
You know exactly what oh. It's so thick.
I've actually never felt it.
Yeah, here.
Give me a little strand of it. Where's the flamethrower?
Dare you to grab that area.
I'll do it. This is like if we threw something at this, it would legitimately hold up.
Yeah, like small children. I feel like I'm capable of doing more.
You're like, oh fuck, I got tools now.
I can use this for something.
Is that the nipple clamp?
It is the nipple clamp. So this piece right here is causing us a lot of our inability to move the intercooler back. So I'm gonna cut this one down a little bit so that way we have more room to shift the intercooler back. There, that should be, it's definitely out of the way now. And we can still use it as a tab at some point. And third, accidents. Accidents happen. And just like me with drag slicks in the rain, you're gonna have issues with the bumper maybe having some damage. Let's address those as well. The very first thing you're gonna need is some sort of sandpaper, guaranteed. Now in this case, this is kind of a cheap kit. Works out really well. This is not a sponsored video, but you're basically gonna need 40 grit, 80 grit, and then 120 to 150. That is all the type of sandpaper you're gonna need to work on Bondo, to work on roughing it in, This phase requires rough sandpaper. It's also really good to have shims, squares, 2x4s, things to mount the bumper, because what we're going to do is make sure that the bumper fits on the car easily. You can zip tie, drill, and then make it contort to fit. That's not the point. The point is you want to have 2 bolts here, 2 bolts there, and the bumper fits 9 times out of 10 the right way the first time. Kind of like Sex Panther cologne. Works 40% of the time, every time. Now that we've got the intercooler back to where it needs to be, it's giving us a little bit more space up here. Wow, that's so not centered anymore, look at that. The bumper, again, is centered, but this intercooler is so damaged and twisted, it's all off spec. Now on this side, it is actually pretty lined up. Still a lot of body work to be done. If you imagine this curve actually following properly, that's a weird angle right there. Build out that a little bit. This lines up fairly well. This gets really weird. And actually, it doesn't work. It needs to come more this way because, look at that. There's some weird things going on here. Right now, our goal is to get these 2 as flush as possible. Because this bumper goes out and this fender goes in, modifying this angle that affects the height right here. It affects this here. What's the correct angle? Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but on custom parts like this, you are the one that makes the correct angle, and that's gonna take a little bit of planning, a little bit of retry, a little bit of attempt, and so on. We just took a little bit of break, and look at what sort of solution we came up with. I'm gonna use the natural advantages here. This bumper is too tall. At the moment, I'd have to shave all of this down and then build extra material here, or shift the bumper up higher. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna use that to our advantage. That's gonna raise this area of the bumper up. And then really what we're dealing with is a lot of extra material here to get rid of and to reform. So I think that's our solution here. We're gonna make sure that the bottom of the bumper is flat, is level, at least with the rest of the body as it should be, and then support the bumper there. What we're gonna use is tools to our advantage to get the bumper to sit in the exact same spot every time. Otherwise, just with this little bit of movement, oh, that's not a big deal. That totally changes the height of this to this and this to this. All of the bolts for the bumper, they're all on the top, so the bottom of the bumper at this moment just hangs down. Yeah, we're not even gonna talk about this side just yet, even though it all has to be balanced still, but my goal is to kind of wedge this side into place and then bring this one in. So we're gonna have to shave this down. There's no doubt about my mind. This is getting shaved down right here. I feel really good about this.
He's been feeling good about this.
I've been feeling really good about this. Right now, your goal is to do a little bit, make sure it's as flush as possible, make sure you're not using your fingertips, make sure you're doing as much as possible to keep the natural line of the body, because as soon as you pull away, you're gonna see it. That dick in my throat just popped back out. As soon as you close the hood, you're gonna see weird lines, ellipses, all these things are gonna show up. Your goal is to keep it as smooth as possible. That didn't get us very far. This is something that's gonna come in really handy throughout this process. Part of it is for making sure that you've sanded down enough. You'll see a lot of people draw like a Sharpie on the actual surface and then sand until the whole Sharpie disappears. It's to start gradually coming in from there. As well as, you can see this is the pinnacle of where this needs to curve out more as well, and so on. You can see those sort of things. Did you just shit change? We definitely need to go to the doctor. And this is really gonna have to come down quite a bit. Wow. Overall, this ended up being a little bit more aggressive than I was expecting. I had to take off more material. What I'm gonna do right now is use an actual file, multi-tool file, all mine are at home. But I'm gonna use a file to take this down even more aggressively so I can really cut into this material to get the bumper even close to the right spot. And almost identically, you know, the bumper shifts a little bit, but almost identical on both sides. So now the bumper is lined up with the wheelbase of the car, which is a very nice standard to have. But does that look aesthetic at the end? But then if things are all lopsided, the bumper, not gonna go very well. What did I say? It's gonna take a while for this sort of process to occur. Jarrett passed out after filming several hours of the identical thing of me filing down a little bit more, looking at it, looking basically the same on camera, and so on. So he passed out. I got my little Adams Polish hoodie on because I'm cold for once in California. But look at how much progress I've made. And here is a key milestone that's worth stopping the video at this moment. Check this out. My whole goal was to have the bumper sit identical on both sides, so both wheel wells had the same exact profile. So I've got about a 1/2 inch of lip over the edge of this board here, and almost identically, you know, the bumper shifts a little bit, but almost identical on both sides. So now the bumper is lined up with the wheelbase of the car, which is a very nice standard to have. Does that look aesthetic? At the end of the day, you can make it all square, but then if things are all lopsided inside the bumper, not gonna go very well. I have had to shave so much out of this area, it's nuts. My decision-making process right now is this. Do I keep shaving things internally and as well up here to pull the bumper even further back on this side to bring this back just a little bit further? I think that the answer is going to be yes. I think I'm going to bring the whole bumper back about 1/8 of an inch. That'll clean up this gap even more. That'll clean up this wheel arch even more. But it's going to make me do it on both sides because, again, we're square now. What has to be done to one side has to be done to both. And sure enough, this side could pull back just a little bit too. All of that was decided over the last couple hours because let's do less is more. Let's focus on using less to get more done. And in this case, yeah, you could fill that in with Bondo and reform the lip and all that, but why not pull the bumper back and trim out what you don't need? Bondo is going to be a pain in the ass. Might as well do this the right way. A couple things that you can start measuring, and you'll notice why this is a good example of body work in its fullest. Look at this gap right here. This was an area that was completely destroyed by me. Good job, Rob. But you can't measure this as an absolute because there's so much body work that needs to be done down here and over here. So I was measuring from here to here at the thinnest part of the bridge, and it was about 3 inches. Your eyes will be able to tell if there is a difference between both of these sides. Now that I have this to fill in, I know that that 3-inch difference is gonna be basically the same on both sides, giving me a nice, consistent bumper all the way around. Another very important aspect to consider is this bumper was formed to the car originally when there was a piece of metal underneath the bumper mounting. The thing that bolted the radiator to the car actually sat underneath the pads of fiberglass that the bumper had. We have about a 1/16, 1/8 of an inch of depression because this is no longer above a radiator mounting plate. So I'm gonna put more plates back in there to re-simulate that, bring the whole bumper up, and make life a little bit easier. There's no reason to reform the entire bumper because something's changed. That'll bring this height up to the correct height, and then all we have to do is focus on getting the bumper back, just that little bit more. Full disclosure, I ended up having to get an angle grinder out and make some magic. This one is a really sick blade. It's got, I don't know, diamond crap inside of it, whatever. The blade's gonna cut through any sort of fiberglass or resin. It might not look that apparent from here, even though it's in 4K, but something I'm gonna have to do now is take the dump pipe, take my wastegate pipe, the screamer one that's sitting through the hood ultimately, off, because that little bit of difference that it's sitting on it right here, which is affecting the height of the hood compared to the bumper. I don't even need it off, I just need it down so that way the hood doesn't hit it. Oh, that hood sits so much better now. If you were wondering when the nipple clamps would come into play, this is the moment. I am going to start locking down areas that I know are absolute. This corner right here is getting really solid. All of this here and here are points where I'm gonna say this is absolutely a point of center. Issue I have right now is the center of the hood does bow up. You can see it right there over the bumper, and I think what I'm gonna do is try to raise the bumper up a little bit with the mount here. I am gonna Bondo and add material to the center of the hood and try and level that out. This area is gonna be one of the two difficult ones. The bumper and the fender have always been misaligned, especially right on this corner here. What I'm gonna do is file this down, get this to a nice area. I'm gonna have to add material here, but the issue comes from the front profile. I'm gonna file this down a little bit to see if I can bring this out, but you can see it starts affecting the curve of the bumper up there. So that's one of the two issues. The other one is, of course, the gap over here. So what I'm gonna do, again, is use the nipple clamps, lock the bumper into the place I want it, and then see how far it gets down here. A little bit of crunchies, but that never hurt anybody. Full disclosure, I ended up having to get an angle grinder out and make some magic. This one is a really sick blade. I don't know, diamond crap inside of it, whatever. The blade's gonna cut through any sort of resin. This thing has come in very handy, being very careful. All right, that one's in. You can see that it's pretty close. There it is, there's the vice grip. But you can see it's close, but not ideal. But this area is the area that looks good. I then took off the middle one and readjusted it just to make sure it wasn't in the way of pivoting or anything like that. Damn, that is looking really, really good. At this point, we can do some fine tuning to get these gaps fixed, do whatever you want with all this, monkey play with that, but we're really fit. This is a fit front bumper, and it is time for Bondo.